In a small, forgotten village nested in the shadows of Yama village, the people lived in a fear of a creature whose name was whispered only in the dead of night. The villagers spoke of a nine-tailed fox, an ancient spirit known for its cunning and its power to shapeshift into the form of a beautiful woman. Some believed it was a guardian, while others feared it was a curse, a force that would bring misfortune to anyone who dared to cross its path. The legend was as old as the village itself. It was said that the fox was a creature of both beauty and terror, with fur as white as snow and eyes that glowed like molten amber. With each tale, the fox grew stronger, its power increasing with each passing century. The 9 tails represented its mastery over nature and the ability to control the spirits of the dead. When it reveals itself to the living, it was often in the form of a woman, clothed in silk, with hair as dark as midnight, and an eerie smile that seemed to promise both seduction and doom. One autumn evening, a young woman named Hannah moved into the village. She had lost her parents to a fever years ago and had come to the village in search of a new beginning. The villagers, wary of strangers, told her little about the village's dark history, and she, eager to escape her grief, paid little mind to the rumours. She took up residence in a small cottage at the edge of the village, surrounded by dense woods, and quickly became acquainted with the local customs. For weeks, all seemed peaceful. Hannah spent her days weaving cloth and tending to her small garden, but as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, strange things began to happen. She would hear soft scratching noises outside of her window in the dead of night, but when she opened the door, there was nothing. Sometimes she would find small gifts, flowers, stones, or trinkets left on her doorstep, though she had no idea who could have left them. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Hannah was walking through the forest when she encountered a woman, a stranger, dressed in a flowing robe of white with long black hair that seemed to shimmer in the dimming light. The woman stood by the edge of a creek, her gaze distant, almost as if she was waiting for something. "Good evening," Hannah cried out, her voice soft but steady. The woman turned slowly, her face impossibly pale, her lips curving into a smile. "Ah, you must be the new one," she said in a voice that sent shivers down Hannah's spine. It was smooth, almost hypnotic. "I've heard of you." Hannah nodded, feeling a strange unease settle in her chest. "I'm Hannah. And you are?" The woman's eyes gleamed, her smile widened. "Call me Yuki," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's so rare to meet someone like you in these parts." There was something about the woman's gaze, something predatory yet alluring, that made Hannah feel as though she was being examined. But before she could speak, Yuki vanished into the forest with a flick of her long, flowing sleeves. Hannah stood frozen for a moment, wondering if she had imagined the encounter, but the strange feeling in the air lingered. Over the next few days, Hannah began to see Yuki more frequently. The women would appear unexpectedly, standing by the creek or in the shadows of the trees, always watching Hannah with that unnerving smile. The villagers, when questioned about her, seemed strangely reluctant to speak. They would glance nervously over their shoulders, their eyes darting, as though they feared the very mention of the name. One evening, as the wind howled through the valley, Hannah saw Yuki once more, standing at the edge of the forest, but this time Yuki's appearance was different. Her long flowing hair was now streaked with silver, now gleamed like molten gold. Hannah felt a cold chill seep into her bones as she approached the women. "You've been curious, haven't you?" Yuki's voice was low, almost as a growl now. her smile widening until it seemed to split her face. Hannah took a cautious step back. Curious? About what? Yuki's eyes darkened. Curious about me. Suddenly, the forest seemed to fall silent. The wind stopped, the rustling leaves halted, and all Hannah could hear was the pounding of her heart. Yuki's figure began to shimmer, her body wrapping and twisting, and before Hannah could react, Yuki's form shifted into something else, a monstrous, towering figure with 9 long gleaming tails, each one flickering and swishing with inhuman grace. Her face was no longer that of a woman, but that of a snarling fox, her eyes glowing with malice. Hannah stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat as the creature's 9 tails whipped through the air, each one leaving trails of fire and frost in its wake. "Do you see now, little human?" The creature's voice was no longer gentle. It was a deep, menacing growl, filled with ancient power. "I am the 9-tailed fox, and I have watched you." Hannah, frozen with terror, could only watch as the creature's glowing eyes pierced into her soul. "You have been marked," the fox said, its voice like thunder. "You sought refuge in this valley, but the valley belongs to me. You are mine now." Before Hannah could scream, the fox lunged at her with terrifying speed, its jaws snapping shut with a sickening crack. But just as the fox's claws were about to tear into Hannah, instincts kicked in. She shoved herself backwards, falling into the creek behind her, the water cold and rushing, swallowing her, dragging her further from the fox's reach. The 9-tailed fox howled in fury as the current swept Hannah away, the echoes of its screams reverberating through the trees. The last thing Hannah saw before the darkness took her was the gleaming eyes of the fox, watching her from the edge of the forest, the tails flickering in the wind like the fangs of a predator poised to strike. Days later, the villagers found Hannah's body by the creek, her eyes wide with terror, her body cold and lifeless. The village elder, the only one who had dared to speak of the curse, knelt beside her and whispered a prayer. "The 9-tailed fox has claimed her," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "and now she is part of its story forever." From that day forward, the valley was no longer a place of peace. Strange things began to happen. Crops withered, children vanished into the woods, and the wind carried the whispers of the fox's call. The villagers knew the truth too well now. The 9-tailed fox had marked Yami Valley as his own, and once you were marked, there was no escaping it. And as for Yuki, the beautiful woman with eyes of gold, she continued to walk the valley, always watching, always waiting for the next soul to fall prey to her ancient power. As you see, for the 9-tailed fox never truly left, it merely waits.